A very good evening to all of us, all of you present here. It gives me immense happiness to welcome you all to the first lecture of the Scholar Circle, Approaches to History from Classical to Contemporary Schools. I would like to first welcome our speaker, Professor Jeevanandam sir, Professor of History at the Center of Women's Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. It also gives me immense joy to introduce you to the Scholars Circle initiative. The Scholars Circle initiative was actually basically an initiative that was created by like-minded friends who wants to create a platform for PhD scholars, and we aim to conduct lectures promoting the sharing of historical knowledge. We, as an initiative, the Scholars Circle would create opportunities for various PhD scholars, and by inviting eminent historians, we aim to encourage historical discussions. I would also like to welcome all the professors, various historians, scholars, and all of our history enthusiasts to an engaging lecture today evening. Thank you so much for participating, and we are so overwhelmed by the responses that you have given to this initiative. Thank you so much, and I would welcome Joseph Purohit from the Department of History, Williamson Sangma University, Meghalaya, to take over the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Bala. Before we proceed with the introduction of today's distinguished speaker, I would like to take a brief moment to remember two eminent historians whose recent passing has left a profound void in the field of historical scholarship. We remember the distinguished historian and Indologist Hermann Kirk, who passed away at the age of 87. Professor Kirk was widely recognized as one of the most influential scholars in the study of Odisha history and culture. A German-born scholar, he devoted several decades of research to understanding the religious, political, and cultural traditions of Odisha, becoming a globally respected voice in the field of Indian history. In recognition of his outstanding contribution to the study of Indian history, the Government of India has honored him with the Padma Shri in the year 2010. We also remember the eminent historian, Professor K.N. Panikkar, who made remarkable contribution to modern Indian historiography. Professor Panikkar was closely associated with Marxist historiography, and his work explored colonial society, communalism, and social movements in India. Some of his path-breaking books include Against Lord and State, Religion and Peasants' Uprising in Malabar Culture and Consciousness in Modern India. His scholarship and commitment to critical historical inquiry will continue to inspire generations of historians yet unborn. The Scholars Circle joins the wider academic community in honoring the enduring legacy of these distinguished historians. With this remembrance, let us now move to the introduction of today's resource person. So it is indeed an honor and a privilege for me to introduce Dr. S. Jeevanandam, Assistant Professor, Center for Women's Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. So before joining JNU in the year 2023, he served as an assistant professor at Sikkim University and Assam University, contributing significantly to teaching and research in history and gender studies. His research interest includes gender, religion, and sacred geography. Dr. Jeevanandam has authored and edited several important academic works, including the book Devadasis in South India, a journey from sacred to profane spaces, and has published numerous research articles in reputed national and international journals. He has also presented over 70 research papers in various national, international conferences. Apart from this, he has also written a couple of Tamil books. In addition to his scholarly contributions, he has held several important academic and editorial roles and has been actively involved in guiding research scholars and participating in academic programs and training sessions across the country. More recently, Dr. Jeevanandam, he was the coordinator for the ICSSR sponsored seminar titled Goddess in the Indian Tradition, History, Culture and Society, which was organized by the Department of Center for Women Studies. So Dr. Jeevanandam, as a coordinator, he demonstrated his active engagement in academic leadership and scholarly collaboration. Apart from this, wherever I go, I've known sir for almost 6 years. Wherever I go, whether it's North India or South of India or Northeast of India. So there are many people who say, who don't even know sir in person or personally. They say, oh, Dr. Jeevanandam, they talk about his academic record, his capability. So to address all those legends, we have the man himself with us, Dr. S. Jeevanandam. Sir, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you. Am I audible, Joseph and Bala?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
First of all, I would like to say thanks to all. And I will start with, how can I say, I wanted to convey certain things before I wanted to start my presentation. When some of these young scholars like Bala and Joseph and their friends, with their
Sir, the audio issue from your
like,
side, sir.
hello?
Yeah, now you are audible.
Okay. See, when they approached me, they told me that they are going to have some kind of an academic platform, which could be the platform for young scholars to get some kind of a guidance for academic intervention and other things. I was little hesitant because the hesitations comes from not that about this particular initiative, about when they wanted to start the program, they asked me to give the inaugural, what can I say, talk. So that's why I little hesitate. Then Joseph said that it's a small program. That then I thought that it is okay. I was taking very lighter in that sense. When they prepared the poster and they started to circulate the particular poster, then came to know that the wide circulation of this particular poster, I get little nervous because sometimes my teachers used to forward those kind of pamphlets to me. Especially today morning, one of my teacher whom I respected a lot, he forwarded that particular pamphlet and asked me to me that he wanted to join. See, he's a, how can I say, he's a renowned scholar in history. He's a very expert in the subject matter. But I was little hesitant, and I'm curious that why he wanted to join. Then finally, he make very interesting statement that that young scholars whom they are organizing this particular event, sir also knows these people. He said that he referred few names and said that these people initiating certain programs, it won't be go wrong. So I was very happy to see this initiative. With the things, I hope and also I wish this particular platform to be the platform for everyone to exchange their intellectual things. So with these things, I would like to start my presentation. So I will start the same thing. I will start my share my screen first. Yeah. I think everyone can see my screen. No. So again, I will go with the same thing when Joseph and Bala and others, when they started to interact with me, they wanted to, when they express about this kind of initiative, I thought that it's a small gathering. So I wanted to give a kind of a discussion on approaches to history from classical to contemporary schools. I thought that could be a starting point. But now I feel that I should go with one particular school of thought. I should discuss about the particular school very elaborately. That could be much better because now the audience are wide in gathering. And also I thought that, I don't know, it's look like a very primitive presentation, but I just wanted to give a kind cover overall perspective, how our historiography also, it's evolving from time to time. So I will go with my presentation. So when we are talking about knowledge and historiography. Very interestingly, a human being can I say appeared on this space more than 1 lakh year ago. Since the time onwards, human started to evolving like any other species, human also evolving. So when we started to discuss about history, when we are talking about human past, I always used to mention one particular important word, that human being also part of this animal kingdom. So the world is divided into two broader category. One is animal kingdom and another is the plant kingdom. So human being is a part of the animal kingdom. Like any other species, human being also part of this earth. And also our lifetime is also not very great in, if you see the historical time space. So around 10,000 years ago, when since the agriculture started to evolve, or otherwise human beings started to understanding what is agriculture, then a certain kind of understanding about that society started to evolve very rapidly. So with that particular things, historiography also evolved. It's not a very static subject, and when we are studying about history, it's very interesting that history is always correlated with power structure. That's why, unlike any other discipline, history had more politics in its nature, and also have lot of contestation also. Some people, that's why we could not try to come to a certain kind of a conclusions for any particular historical event. For example, when we are talking about the popular India, can I say the triggering point, otherwise we can say that important historical event in modern India, that is 1857. When we are talking about 1857, all the historians across the boundary, they accept that that is one of the important historical moment in the history of India. But when they're discussing about the particular historical event, but the historians are not come to the kind of a concession, or otherwise they could not come to the kind of a common understanding that what kind of a movement it was. For example, some they used to refer it as a kind of a revolt, some used to call it as a first war of independence, some used to call as mutiny. See, these kind of a connotations, not just a kind of a reflecting certain me or vocabulary kind of a things. It carried very intense political meaning. So that's why when we are talking about the discipline called history or historiography, it's very problematic. And the problem, it's not comes with the discipline, it is problems come with the orientation and the power, and it was how it was represented in the particular historical context. So in this context, that's what very interesting word I wanted to keep it here, the word called historiology or historiography. If you take any other discipline, like for example, there is a discipline called biology, there is a discipline called geology was there, and also there is a discipline, there is a discourse called biography and also geography. When we are talking about geology, when largely we are talking in the sense that it is talking about science of the earth, and when we are talking about geography, it is mentioning about description of it. Similarly, if we wanted to talk about biology, it's about science of life, and biography, it is description of life. But when it comes to the historical writing, we are not referring it as a historiology, we are referring it as historiography. That means when we are writing history, it is a combination of both. That means it's a science of history, and also it is also description of it. And if you wanted to discuss about history, I wanted to place it, history is also like any other discipline, it is very scientific in its nature, and also history reflect the what are the scientific evolution that was taken place on the global scenario. For example, if any scientific inventions happen, okay, that change the perspective of discipline across the world. Similarly, what happening, any new inventions happen, the discipline called history also reshape, or otherwise it is also changing its perception or orientation. A classical example, if I wanted to say, until 19th century, the Indian historian, or otherwise when we are talking about Indologist or anyone who work on Indian past, they wanted to focus, or they started Indian history with Vedic period. They are not discussing about anything related to Harappa or Mohenjo-daro. Very interestingly, this is not happening with just a political intention, because until 19th century, there is no excavation that was taken place regarding to Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. So once the new inventions was taken place, then the discourse of history also started to change. Similarly, if you see in the Tamil Nadu Indian context, recently the excavation that was taken place in Tamil Nadu, Keeladi and other places, it is also trying to give certain important changes in the historical discourse. So that's what I'm trying to say is that history, it's a very scientific in its nature. Historiography also very interesting discipline like any other academic discipline. So in this context, history or historiography evolved from time to time without, how can I say, break. That was very interesting thing. And also this evolution, it is not happening. For example, this change is not happening 100 years or 200 years. Sometimes the evolution process was taken more than 10 decades, 10th century or even the 15th century. In this context, when we started discussing about classical age, the classical historiography started with the, how can I say, Greek tradition. Why we are talking about the Greek tradition? Because if you see when we are talking about in Indian tradition, I already told you, the Vedic tradition or otherwise Vedic culture was predominant and started to documenting about the society through literature. Similarly, what happening? It had carried a more, how can I say, it is also reflecting the society. For example, Vedic literature reflecting the society, but they have some kind of a subjective and also they have not thinking the historical events are taken place as a political event. So what happening when we are talking about classical historiography, mostly we are giving importance to, can I say, the Greek and Roman historical tradition, because they're trying to see or otherwise trying to study the past, that means historical event as a kind of an event that was happening isolated as a political event, but they're not giving more importance or stress to the religious tradition. But very interestingly, what happened in the medieval times, if you see the entire world, either it is a European history or either otherwise the Indian history, the religion played a very important role in writing the historical style. So in this context, what happening? Greek and Rome, they carried the earliest tradition. They are not having very critical towards what happening and why happening and the particular historical time. And also, if you take mostly it is look like a kind of a documenting, it's look like a more like a memoir or more like what happening of the particular time. They just document without critical aspect. So there is no reasoning can I say, established in their historical writing. But however, what happening, they started to write the events without subjectivity. That's what very interesting argument that was happening in the classical historiography. Following that, very interesting thing that was happening in the medieval time, where the religion played a very important role globally. For example, if you take the medieval period of Europe, where the feudalism became very important mode of production, where the Roman Catholic Church played a very important role. So the entire doctrine or entire religious doctrine started to controlling the history discipline also. For example, the concept of periodization, what we are having in modern history, it is also a kind of inspirations come from the how can I say, Christian thought. What is Christian thought here? Saint Augustine, he is trying to classify the period based on the Christian belief as a 6 different epoch. For example, how he come to that 6 number is also very interesting. According to Christianity, according to Abrahamic tradition, the world was created by God in 6 different days. So within 6 days, God created the entire world. So Saint Augustine was inspired this particular concept, and he started to documenting historical event in 6 different period. So according to his understanding, he classified once again. So his book called The City of God is very interesting work in understanding about how the periodization happened in the history of in historiography. So according to him, I already told that it is about the 6 successive ages from creation of the world to the last judgment day. So the first age from Adam to Noah, where the God created the entire world, and also he created the humanity. So it extended up to the great flood that was happened. Okay, that means the first epoch, it was started from the age of begins with the creation of humanity. So it ends with the great flood. So what is very interesting thing, this particular period carried very important argument of fall of humanity and introduction of sin, and also early generations of the humankind. That's a very interesting argument. That the entire perspective comes from the Abrahamic tradition. The second age, it started from Noah to Abraham, where this particular historical space happened after the flood. The new phase of human history begins according to Saint Augustine. So it ended with the emergence of Abraham. So the following that, this particular period was carried very important, according to Saint Augustine, important event where the repopulation of earth was started, and also formation of yearly nation states.
Sir, we cannot hear your voice.
Hello, am I audible now? Hello.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
you are audible.
Okay.
So
Okay, the fourth age, it's from David to Babylonian captivity, and also the fifth age, it is considered as from Babylonian captivity to birth of Jesus Christ. This particular historical time, representations of birth of Jesus Christ, and also it is representing the Jewish society, and also growth of messianic expectations. So this is very interesting understanding about history. Then the following the sixth age, there is starting was birth of Jesus Christ, but there is no fixed date, end date. So what happening? It's look like a open-ended, where the entire humanity waiting for arrival of the second coming of Jesus Christ. So what is this particular period signify? The period signifies the spread of Christianity and also development of Christian church in the world. So based on this inspiration, in 17th century, there is a person called Christopher Cellarius. He trying to conceptualize the world into three historical time. Ancient age, that means Historia Antiqua, from beginning to 5th century, where the Roman Empire was, that means from the beginning of the world to where the Roman Empire was collapsed. So similarly, what happening? The Middle Age, that means Historia Media. It was started from 5th century to 15th century, where the Constantinople or Istanbul was captured by Ottomans. The New Age also, it started after the 15th century. But very interestingly, what happened, the Christopher Cellarius, what he done, he did not specifically give importance to religious orientation towards understanding of the history. Instead of what happening, he is giving a kind of a somewhat secular understanding towards past. Why I'm bringing this argument here? If you see the history as a discipline, it is evolving. It is not static. And also it is representing certain historical time, and also it's representing the human thought process of the historical time. Now, another very interesting period that started in the 16th, 17th century, where the Enlightenment movement was became very prominent. That means why we are discussing about Enlightenment movement here. If you take the entire medieval world, I already mentioned that it is full of discussion towards religion. The world was created by God. The world was controlled by God. Whatever happened in the world, it happened because of the will of the God. Either, I already told you, if it is in Europe, it is because of the Roman Catholic Church played a very important role. If it is in West Asia, Islam played a very important role. In the Indian context, Hindu religion played a very important role. So that controlled the human mind. So human was dominated, that value completely was dominated by a religious tradition. But what happened in the 16th century, after the the plague, after Black Death, these things was scientific revolution that was taken place in Europe that leads to the very important changes in the thought process. That thought process reflecting on the human thinking also. What was the most important thinking? For example, the Rene Descartes, very interestingly, he come to the kind of a conclusion that, okay, mind and body, that means he's coming with a very interesting argument that I think, therefore I am. What is the meaning of I think, therefore I am? Until that, the humanity started to believe the God was everything. Now, gradually, they departed from the religion. They started to think about humanity. They started to say that, hey, see, the human values are more important, and also human being evolved from time to time based on their thought process rather than the natural or otherwise supernatural things. So this important juncture made a significant impact on the discipline of history. So what happening, this renaissance, and very interestingly, there is no professionalization was taken place in the disciplines. What is professionalization? For example, when I talking about a medieval scientist, okay, one of the important person was Leonardo da Vinci. He was also a scientist and also artist. And also, if you take Michelangelo, he was a painter, sculptor, and architect. And if you take Immanuel Kant, he is a philosopher. There is no specific disciplinary boundary was there until the 16th century. But what happening in the post Renaissance, gradually the specialization was become very important, or otherwise we can call that as a professionalization of the discipline. So in this context, what happening in 18th century, history as a kind of a separate discipline emerged as a new academic intervention. Internationally also, for example, in 1712, France, they started to have a kind of academy at France to discuss about their political condition, and also that leads to the new kind of academic institutions. For example, they started to establish a kind of a chair. It is called as natural history. It was established in 1513 at Rome. Okay, following that in Leiden, 1593, then Oxford 1669, and 1724 at Cambridge. These are all the new institutions they started to establish to discuss about a kind of a otherwise professionalization of the disciplines, to understand why the society is having similar kind of a problems and how to rectify those problems. So until 16th century, religion dominated the thought process, but from the 16th century onwards, people gradually started to understanding scientifically why the social changes are taking place in the society. Okay, and another very interesting point is that this kind of a trend was extended globally. And in the meantime, the colonialism became a very important institution, started to dominating the entire academic discourse of the world. Gradually, the Renaissance and Reformations that led to the scientific revolution, that scientific revolutions that led to the global expansions. So in this case, what happening, the Europe, when started to expand, they wanted to study about the other regions. When I say the other regions, for example, they wanted to settle in Northern America. They wanted to study about the Northern American society. Similarly, Latin America, in Indian subcontinent, when they started to settle, they wanted to study about these regions. So with these new kind of political situations also led to the widespread emergence of the history discipline. In this particular context, a new school of thought, okay, these are all not very scientific in its nature, but these are all very primitive in understanding about society. Why I'm saying it's not scientific in nature, if you take the earlier schools like Orientalist school, and also if you take nationalist, even after that, can I say, communist historiography. So these all different schools have a kind of a particular standpoints. What is very interesting argument that the professionalization is not started in the initial stage. And remember, when we are talking about schools of thought, we should not keep it in the chronological order alone. A person who lives in modern times, that means 2025, if you take a person one who study about history, okay, if they strongly believe that Orientalist perspective as very important, okay, so we could not see the school of thought with the chronological order. A modern person can also have a kind of a Orientalist perspective in looking the historical past. Like the Cambridge School is also one of the example of that one. Similarly, what happening in this, can I say, nationalist also, not just in 19th century or 20th century, even in modern times also, the nationalist perspectives played a very important role. Similarly, Marxist school of thought. So different schools emerged. So don't think that this particular school of thought belongs to some historical time. It is not like that. It is about orientation, how a person trained in approaching the historical sources, and also how he is writing or interpreting historical sources. That's very important thing. So when we are talking about Orientalism, it was very interesting that I already told you it started with the colonialism, and they came with certain kind of an important perspective. Okay, what is the perspective? They don't know about these countries, okay, a new land. So what happening? They wanted to study about this new land. When they started to study about this new land, they used to have their own perspectives. What was their perspective? They always keep the Western culture as a yardstick. So they always underestimate the Asian countries. Okay, so in this context, what happening? The subjectivity was more, and also the understanding of the Asian society, it was very biased. Very interestingly, if we wanted to see this particular school of thought, they how can I say? Very interestingly, for example, Max Muller, if you take, Max Muller never visited India at any historical time, but very interestingly, Max Muller wrote, how can I say, equally very strong number of literature on Indian history and also India's tradition. And very interestingly, he discussed about Indian philosophy very detailedly, but he never had the opportunity to visit India. So what happening throughout his stay or his lifetime, he was there in Europe, and he, through the secondary literature, through secondary informations, he started to documenting the Indian tradition with his own subjectivity. Similarly, what happening? That's why what happening? They could not in a position to provide, can I say, complete historical knowledge about India. So that's why the lot of subjectivity was there. And similarly, what happening? Those who settled in Bengal, they had a different perspective about Indian past. Those who settled in Madras Presidency and those who settled in Bombay Presidency had a different historical views about Indian society. That's why these Orientalist narrations could not make a complete understanding about India's past. That leads to the lot of identity crisis in the following centuries. That's very interesting argument. And also, overall, if we wanted to see, this particular school of thought always underestimate Indian values, and also it's always, can I say, it is simplified or otherwise homogeneous the diverse nature of Indian society, and also it creating a kind of a dichotomy between the civilized West and the barbaric East. And also it is giving a kind of a, can I say, it is having a kind of a Western values as the upper hand. So Indian tradition and Indian values as a kind of a, how can I say, not a culturally superior one. So what is happening? So we could not in a position to give kind of a historical argument why the history of India are changing happening with the scientific temper. So there is no scientific temper in understanding this particular school of thought. So following that, what happening? Nationalist historians emerged. So I already told you, the Orientalist school, they started to criticizing the East. So to counter that, what happening? The native historian started to recounter the Western notions. Especially, they countered to the Orientalist school of thought. The historiography started to emphasize the glorification of the past. Any country. That's why I already told you, when we are talking about 19th century, the Indian nationalist historian started to discuss more on Vedic literature, and also they started to thinking about, they wanted to position India's culture or India's prestige ahead than the can I say the Western world. So they entered into the kind of a spiritual discussions. So they wanted to stand that India had a very strong spiritual tradition when it's compared to the materialistic nature of the Western civilization. So this particular argument also centered on a kind of a subjectivity. What is subjectivity here? Again, they are not going into the scientific inquiry of what was happening in the past. Instead of what happening, they entered and they started to thinking about India's past in the some kind of a defensive mode. Very interestingly, if you see the argument of Mill, his classification of Hindu India or Muhammadan India or British India, he brought those ideas from the Western perspective. If you take the Indian history, India did not consider anyone as others, outsiders. India did not have the concept of outsiders. If you take historically, if you take in the Indus Valley civilization, people from Central Asia, people from across the world, they used to migrate towards the Indian subcontinent. But what is happening in the colonial time, they wanted to polarize the society into communal lens. So naturally what happening, why they wanted to communalize the history in the communal line? Very interestingly, the Europe had a communal problem in their historical past. If you take in the medieval time, I already told you, religion was the important, institutions where the thought process was constructed. In that case, the Europe was severely encountered with Asia. West Asia was completely dominated by the Islamic rulers. When it comes to Europe, it was dominated by the Roman Catholic Church and also its institutions. So this polarization started there, not in Indian context actually. So in this context, what happening? The Europe had a strong negative opinion about the East, especially the Arabs, and also because they could not travel via land. That's why they have to take a kind of a sea voyages. When they settled in the Asian continent, for example, especially in India, so they wanted to carry their politics of their medieval politics in the Indian modern context. So in that context, if you take, for example, if you take Mughal army, if you take otherwise, if you take, Shivaji's army, if you take Mughal army, if you take Maratha army, significant numbers of soldiers, both the army carried a different religious tradition. Mughals had a significant number of Hindu army soldiers. Similarly, Marathas also had Muslims as the soldiers and also important key positions. So when we are talking about, very interestingly, India did not have this kind of other concept. That's what I'm trying to explain. But what happening when Europe constructing India's past, they constructed India past in the communal line. So the nationalist historian also consciously or unconsciously forced to take this similar line to counter the Western understanding. What happened when they're talking about the women's conditions in Indian scenario? Unfortunately, during the 19th and the early 20th century, the nationalists could not have a kind of a clear-cut answer to counter the Orientalist argument. So they wanted to take it as a kind of a communal line. For example, when we're talking about sati, they used to simply come to the very casual conclusion that because the intervention of Islamic rulers in India, sati was practiced. Caste also, because of Islamic rule in India, it was practiced. The point is that because they don't have certain kind of argument to counter this Orientalist discourse. So when we are talking about the history of sati, sati was practiced much earlier or before the rise of Islam in West Asia itself. Similarly, the caste system was prevalent in India before the Islam emerged as a kind of a religion. So what I'm trying to say is that the communal understanding of Orientalist nationalists also to counter the communist agenda of the Orientalists, they consciously or unconsciously, they also fall into the trap. So that's why the nationalist history also have some kind of a subjectivity in understanding the past. Then the another very interesting argument is that I already told you, one particular school they're keeping Western culture or Western civilization as a yardstick, and they're underestimating or they're demeaning the rest. When the nationalists, they wanted to, how can I say, defend their culture, so they fall in the trap and trying to, can I say, substantiate the trap to different meaning. So following that, what happening, if you take in the 19th century or early 20th century, India is also communalized because of not our experiences, because of European experiences. So what happening, their history was distorted. So during this particular time, this particular communist agenda of historical writing are directly or indirectly started to supporting one kind of a particular religious groups. So this particular kind of historical approach also demeaning, or otherwise it is not substantiating what is history, what is scientific understanding of the historical narrations. So after this, what happening, very interestingly, in Europe, there is another school of thought emerged, that is positivist, otherwise, can I say, empiricist school of thought. See, so far what we have discussed, there is some kind of a perception played a very important role in writing the historical documents or historical sources, or perceiving the historical sources. So positivist school of thought emerged very interestingly. They wanted to give importance to scientific understanding. What is scientific understanding here? They're giving importance to sources. Okay. And also it emerged in Europe again. Okay. It emerged in Europe. They wanted to see the historical past through documents. What are the documents explained? They consider that that is ultimate truth. Very interestingly, or unfortunately, what happening, they did not in a position to scrutinize what kind of a documents that they are studying, because not all the documents could reveal the exact historical facts. The historical documents also should carry some kind of a subjectivity or some kind of a bias, and also it is carrying a kind of a can I say, not complete historical facts. So the positive school of history in the 19th century, they're trying to move from subjective understanding, but unfortunately what happening, they could not also bringing a kind of a complete methodology to understanding what was historical past and how to study the historical past without any kind of a subjectivity. So in that sense, what happening, they're coming with certain kind of important arguments, or otherwise concepts like empiricism, objectivity, and determinism and generalization. So this is one of the important attempt globally to how to study a historical documents or how to write a history. So this is positivist school or empiricist history become very important if you take the historiography as a very important argument. Following that, Marxist school became very interesting and also very important. When we are talking about Marxist school, first time, see, when we are talking about history, history is about the past. History is about studying about the past to understand why the social changes that was taken place. If you take Orientalist, they have a subjective opinion, they have a perception. If you take nationalist, they have certain stand to classify the historical past. They're similar to the communist historians. So the what happening with the positivist school of thought, they did not have a perception to study why the social changes that was taken place. The primitive human being, how they came into the modern human being at present. There is a long historical time. So what happening, there is a kind of a scientific understanding we require to study about these changes. So first time in historiography, the Marxist school trying to understand the changes through materialistic understanding. Okay, so in that case, what happening? They're trying to broaden the scope of historical inquiry to include experiences of working classes and marginalized groups. So what they done, they're also classified the historical past, okay, and the primitive society, and if you can I say feudal society, then capitalist society, socialist society. In the primitive society, or otherwise in the tribal society, where the people used to think that there is no can I say, division of labor, because since there is no private property, so there is no requirement of the division of labor that was there. In that context, what happening? The people are Marxists believed that okay, people had a equal space during those time. What happening with the creation of feudal structure? There's two classes that was there. One is how can I say, lord, and another class is serf. So these two different class, and these different classes that leads to the kind of a classes between these two different classes that leads to the new social formation that went to the capitalist society, where the bourgeois and proletariat become very important social groups. So according to them, the can I say, the economic will determine the social conditions. So the changes in the economical structure, that means base structure, that change the can I say, orientation of the society. So this particular school of thought became very important in the historiography, because it is helping historians to study the past in the scientific, with the scientific temper. So following that, what happening? Though the Marxist school is also very interesting and also very important in scientific in nature, but it is also having certain important problem in understanding about the past. It could not tell the complete answers to why the society shifting from one to particular to another. Okay, so in this context, what happening? In the early 20th century, there is a new historical school emerged that is called as annals, or otherwise we can call it as a total history. Very interesting, this particular school of thought, because what Marxism trying to say, the base structure influencing the superstructure. So anything happen in the base structure, that means the economy changes, that leads to the changes in the superstructure. So, but what happening here, the historians, that means in in the early 20th century, in France, a group of young mind, okay, sit together. They wanted to study about why the society changes from time to time. Okay, so Lucien Febvre and Marc Bloch, these are all the two important personalities from University of Strasbourg. They wanted to trying to understand discipline as a holistically. What is holistically here? Instead of compartmentalizing social sciences or humanities as a different discipline. So don't say that this is geography, this is sociology, this is anthropology, this is ethnography, like that. If you wanted to study the past, you have to be a sociologist, you have to be a psychologist, and you have to be a geographer. And also they're trying to say that it is not just a kind of a, how can I say, a economy only determined. Certain times geography also played a very important role in constructing a particular kind of a society. For example, we are living in 2025. So 2025 New York, 2025 New Delhi, 2025 Gangtok, it is not same. Okay, it is not same for the people who lived in there. Those people having earning similar, or otherwise those who possess the similar kind of a wealth, but that wealth could not directly are reflecting their can I say, social conditions. Geography played, for example, their consumption. I will tell you one example, that in entire South India, not South India, for example, in Kerala, they prefer coconut oil. If you come to Tamil Nadu, if you go to Karnataka or Andhra Pradesh, they prefer groundnut oil. If you come to Northern India, mustard oil became very important, can I say, a consumption product. If you go to the Europe, it became olive. So here, a person's taste, a person's cushion, a person's culture was not just determined by whatever the economical status what they have. It is also determined by the geography. So what this particular school of thought they're trying to say, don't compartmentalize. They wanted to say the interdisciplinary approach are very, very important. That interdisciplinary approach only helps to study the society holistically. Okay, so this is one step ahead than the Marxist school of thought. So this particular, how can I say, the historians, they come with a kind of a journal. The journal is called Annals. So that's why this particular school of thought is also called as Annal School of Thought, or otherwise it is also called as Total History. So this particular journal created a kind of a path-breaking intervention in the discipline of history, in the writing style of historiography. Okay, this particular school still it's become very important in writing the historical in historiography. So what is very interesting here, they divided the historical time in 3 different way. One is that, yeah, of course, I'm not denying that one. Annals established, or otherwise they expanded the Marxist school of thought. I'm not denying that one. What I'm trying to say is that, so this is another way of studying the science, another way to scientifically look at the society. So what is they trying to say? They're trying to see the historical changes or historical time in 3 different phases. Okay, they're trying to see the history of science, of change. Okay, one is that longue durée, that means long term or structural changes that was taken in the long historical time. Second one is moyenne durée, that means conjecture. The conjecture means there is a short term, that means 500, 600 years changes that we can study. There is another one is courte durée event. That, for example, if you wanted to study the history of can I say freedom movement, we can study that 100 years. So that is an event. Okay, but if you wanted to see why India comes under the colonial clutches, why Europeans started to dominating India. So we have to go with the little deeper. Okay, it started from 14th century. It started even go beyond that particular historical time. So the concept of a temporal historical changes. So if you take, for example, Saint Augustine, he classified historical past in 6 approach because of based on Abrahamic tradition. When later they classified into 3 with regard to an understanding the scientific way. So now Marxists are trying to see the historical past in different. I already told you that. Can I say primitive primitive society, feudal society, capitalist society, socialist society, and communist society. Then this particular school of thought, they're trying to say longue durée, moyenne durée, and courte durée. That means it's another very interesting changes that we have to study the historical time. This is another very interesting thing. I already told you history evolving and also history changes from time to time because of the need of the society. So when we are talking about, I already told you that Marxist school, it's talking about structural changes, then annals expanding that particular argument. But very interestingly, what happening, that is the marginalized people in the past. When we are talking about 1857, a group of historians talking about different reasons for can I say why the particular incident in 1857 the incident was taken place. They wanted to focus, but they are not understanding what was the condition of the peasant. That means the people who does not have a proper agency to represent their can I say historical experiences. So what happening in the 1970s? Very interestingly, if you take in the global trend also, the new kind of academic intervention was taken place. In 1950s, I wanted to discuss with subaltern history with the gender history both together, because in the 1970s, what happening globally, they wanted to give importance to a gender history, or otherwise, what can I say, women's studies as or women as an important historical agent, or otherwise women as an important historic, can I say, cultural element to study. What is their position in society or culture or anything? So what happening, the different disciplines started to take women as an important component. Similarly, what happening in Indian context, where the society was, caste was a very important element of the society, where the approach of Marxist school or annal schools could not address what is the condition of marginalized. So subalterns became very important intervention in this particular historical time. So Antonio Gramsci, Ranajit Guha are inspired by the Antonio Gramsci's statements. So he started to challenge the dominant narratives and give voice to those historically excluded and mainstream historical accounts. So this school has become very interesting in 1970s. Similarly, I already told you, so gender history became very important historical school. So 1970, I already told you, okay, United Nations organization declared a decade for women, and also they started to giving importance to the study of women in every discipline. Okay, so all the disciplinary aspects started to focusing women as an important component, scientific component to study. So in that case, what happening? Historiography also started to locate what is the condition of women. Initially, it started as a women's history, trying to see where women were located in the past, or trying to see documenting the life experiences of women. But gradually, what happening? That women history is also started to evolve as a gender history, trying to study about the power dynamics between what is masculinity, what is femininity in the historical transition. So when we are talking about gender history, it is trying to see trying to find out women in the 5 different historical spheres. One is that where women were completely, how can I say, not equal in its space. For example, if you take historiography, we can't find women. So what happening? They're trying to locate whether women historiography are there or not. So similarly, what happening? The new kind of a methodology they started to bring. So this particular school of school trying to give a kind of importance to innovative, how can I say, innovations to search the facts. For example, gender history giving importance to the diaries, personal notes, and all the things. If you take the conventional historiography, they were not accepting the conventional historical, the conventional historiography did not accepting the non-conventional historical sources. But gender history giving a kind of a space for historian to use new kind of innovative sources. So gender history is become a kind of an interdisciplinary field of study that examines the role of gender in shaping historical process, experiences, and identities. And also it explores how notions of masculinity and femininity and other gender identities intersect with the power and also dynamics of social norms and cultural practices. So gender historians gradually trying to uncover the voices and experiences of women and men and gender non-conforming individuals often overlooked in traditional narratives. So this is the important intervention in the historiography. Following that, again, the new kind of a study that was taken place, that they're bringing a kind of a concept called environmental history, where they started to study of humans have to interacted with and shaped the natural environment throughout history. So they wanted to focus on that one. So it examined the ways in which environmental factors have influenced the human societies and vice versa, tracing the evolution of human nature relationship over the time. So environmental historians draw on insights from ecology, geography, anthropology, economics, and other disciplines to understand the complex dynamics of human environmental interactions. So this is another very interesting school of thought. Then gradually the attention shifted to culture. So the people started to focusing about social and cultural practices, especially in the field of beliefs, values, and the expressions of the societies. So, and also it started to examine culture, what are the things that shapes cultures, and also why this particular historical process was taken place, and it's raising the identity questions and power dynamics and the social interactions. So cultural historians started to explore a wide range of cultural phenomena, including art, literature, music, ritual beliefs, language, and everyday practices. So there is a slight, very interesting thing is that there is a slight differences between social history and cultural history. If you see the focus area of the social history, it is focusing on social structure and everyday life of the ordinary people. On the other hand, the cultural history, I already mentioned that it is focusing on symbols, beliefs, meanings, and cultural practices. So what is the key questions when it comes to social history? It started focusing that how do the social structure and relations shape the people's lives? How do people, and on the other aspect of cultural historians, they're trying to study how do the people interpret and give meaning to their world. That's very interesting. So methodologically, if you want to locate, the social historians largely uses statistics, demographic, and socio-economic analysis. On the other hand, the cultural historians trying to use interpretative analysis, cultural anthropology, and textual studies. And if you wanted to see these subjects, what they studied, especially the social historians studied about workers, peasants, family structures, and class relationship. And if you wanted to see the cultural historians, they focus on myths, symbols, rituals, festivals, and literature, art. So what I'm trying to say is that this is a new kind of a important, how can I say, evolution within the school of historiography. Then if you wanted to study the last one, it's about digital history. Okay, if you see in modern times, AI become very important, how can I say, technology. So how historians using those technologies is very interesting and very important. I already told you, history is not an isolated discipline which is operated alone. All the what are the changes, scientific changes that was taken place globally that impact on the discipline called history. So like that, what happening, the intervention of AI and also the new technology that made a significant impact on the discipline of history also. So the digital history played a very important role. It is also using the different technology and trying to study the historical data. And also it is using a big, trying to study the big data, and also trying to use the digital archives, and also documentation is very interesting in this particular aspect. Very interestingly, for example, when we are talking about the last languages, what AI is trying to help that some of the last languages, if we feed the data, for example, a Hebrew language, it was, how can I say, most of the places, the language was lost, sometimes, most of the places. In that case, what AI is to do, if you feed the data, if you feed the language, if you give the meaning, that AI is trying to give a kind of a 60% of the trying to give a right answers to the historical questions. So, but it is not matching with the human thought process, but still the digital technologies also played a very important role in modern way of writing historical past. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Now we'll open the floor for the participants. Questions from the participants. If there is any questions, please unmute yourself. Yes, Sanjay, Mr. Sanjay Ponusamy, please.
Good evening, sir. It was a very good presentation covering all the historiographies. I just have one doubt. Where do we place postmodernism and post-structuralist historiography?
See, when we are talking about, I am not considering that postmodern historiography as very important in our discussions. Why I am not thinking in that sense? Because I felt that conventional historiography, I strongly believe in annal school of history. It's much better in understanding about the holistic study of the past. So for example, when we are talking about the postmodernist historiography, or similarly what happening, we have to take certain historical stand actually. So in that case, what happening again, the subjectivity played a very important role. And also it is talking about some kind of a, can I say, we are become a kind of a actor in the particular studying about the past. In that case, what happening, I am not finding much comfortable in, can I say, studying or using the postmodern concept in studying the historical narrations. For me, according to my understanding, I particularly felt that annal school, or otherwise total history, is much better in studying about the historical changes, and also it's giving a kind of a scientific way of understanding about the past. That's what my understanding. I'm not denying that what postmodernists are used to say, for example, the understanding of the power and other things. But as a historian, as a, how can I say, to study the past with the historic scientific temper, I felt that annals are otherwise total history, the school of his annal school is much better. That's what my understanding to that.
Thank you so much, sir.
Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Michael.
Hello, sir. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, brother.
How are you, sir?
I'm fine.
Sir, we are very much overwhelmed by your presence, sir. and it was a very refreshing lecture. And my question is, sir, you were speaking about when you are speaking about the nationalist historians, you said they got into the clutches of these narratives.
Yeah.
So it is, as a historian, it is always a juggle between these narratives and the actual factual history. So what do you feel as the challenges as historian to juggle between this subjectivity and objectivity, sir? So it has been always a very interesting thing to look at it, and it is a challenging thing to understand. So this is my question, sir. Thank you.
It's very interesting question. When we are talking about subjectivity and objectivity, see, when we are I can't say that we have to be completely away from our subjectivity, because it is not possible. When we are choosing a particular historical research work itself, it comes from our subjectivity. In that context, what happening? So what is my understanding? So for example, as a historian, when we are talking about objectivity, my stress is only one. Okay, don't bend your sources according to your political understanding. That's the only thing I wanted to say. You take the sources, like the way the positivists are trying to say. Okay, you take the sources. Your sources may not be substantiate your hypothesis, but try to accept that your source, that for particular historical event may not be very comfortable for you. But on the other hand, what I'm trying to say is that you try to can I say, we can't move completely away from our subjectivity. Instead of that, what we can say, we are accept that historical facts are different. So we have to, can I say, change, or otherwise we can change our orientation. That's what I'm saying. But don't bend the sources according to your political understanding. That's what my answer to you, brother.
Yes.
We can take 2 to 3 more questions. Anyone else? Yeah. Yes, Dr. Kumar. Yes, please.
Actually, I wanted to add one more thing. Question asked by someone, actually, this is about where to locate postmodernists. Actually, when the subalterns started their work, the subalterns, especially Ranajit Huda and others, were Marxist. Initially, they were Marxist, influenced by the ideas of Italian Marxist and Marxist from England. So they adapted the word subaltern and other things. Later, when the book was published by Edward Said, Orientalism, the subalterns came under Marx, what you call the postmodernism. So now majority of the subalterns are subscribed to postmodern ideas. So this is one thing I wanted to add. Actually, I wanted to ask Jeeva, why Jeeva didn't include the other schools of history writing, especially the Dalit history writing. There are other schools emerged nowadays called Dalit Marxist history writing, Dalit feminist Marxist history writing. Thank you.
See, it's a very good question. I'm not intentionally, I'm not, can I say, not including that one. When we are talking about subaltern school of history, and also when we are discussing about gender, so Dalit school of historical thought, otherwise Dalit intervention in the disciplines became very important. Okay, so that's why I want, unfortunately, I did not include when I'm talking about gender history. When we are talking about, can I say, Dalit women, okay, or otherwise the experience of marginalized community. So this subaltern school and also the gender, can I say, history, later in the Indian context, apart from the subaltern school, Dalit historiography became very important intervention in the 1970s, especially in the 1980s and 1990s. For example, if you take some of the important, for example, if you wanted to study Indian past, the Ambedkar was the best person to study. Can I say, for best person, we always thinking that Ambedkar as a kind of a, can I say, person who write about the Indian Constitution. It is not only the Ambedkar write the Indian Constitution. He is also one of the important historian and also philosopher in studying the Indian past. In this context, what happened in the 1990s? If you take very interestingly, people like Chinnarao sir, and also others started evolving this particular school of thought. I'm not avoiding that particular school of thought, but when I'm discussing about subaltern and also gender, I wanted to bring that particular aspect. Unfortunately, I missed that one, but thank you, Kumar, for bringing that one. Thank you.
We have Miss Ritika and Mr. Rafael. Apart from these two people, we can't take further questions as we are running short of time. So, Miss Ritika, you can go ahead.
Good evening, sir. I want to ask a general question. There are many historians. What is the major perspective of the historians?
I could not get you. What is the major?
What is the major perspective of the historians?
Major perspective. See, largely we want to study why the changes that was taken in the particular historical context. That was the question. So that was the questions. Mostly we wanted to know the answer for the particular questions. For example, Joseph is working on tribal history. So he wanted to see how the tribal culture changed historically. So most of the historians have a perspective why the particular changes was taken place. Why these different schools we are discussing is that, so what happening in approaching these particular questions, we may fall into the trap of different kind of problems. Okay, so these different schools of history will help you to, for example, Kumar, I forgot to include even tribal history also. So what happening, this particular, can I say, these particular different schools is helping us to, for example, if you wanted to study about the tribal, so the tribal school of history giving more methodological inputs to how to study these particular nuances. So mostly, if I wanted to simplify your question, so most of the historians wanted to see why the changes was taken place in particular time. That's what I think so.
Okay, sir.
Mr.
Thank you,
Rafael,
sir.
last question. Oh, yeah. So one last question from Mr. Rafael, and we'll end the Q&A session with that. Mr. Rafael, yes, please. Okay, I think he's not responding. So I think we can conclude. I request Mr. Vignesh to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Joseph. So, good evening, everyone. On behalf of this Scholar Circle, a platform that is created by passionate individuals, historians, to promote the sharing of historical knowledge through lectures by eminent and the emerging scholars, this provides a space for presenting our research ideas, which encourages discussions and fostering meaningful academic engagement within our community and other disciplines too. So it's my privilege to propose this vote of thanks. First and foremost, I express my sincere gratitude to our esteemed resource person, Dr. Jeevanandam. Sir, very thank you. So it's been a wonderful session. So the session has been engaging as well as an enlightened one. So your clear explanation of different historical traditions, both during the lecture as well as during the Q&A time, from classical perspective to the contemporary schools of thought, has greatly enriched our understanding of historical methodology and the way of we interpreting it. Um Second most thing, I would also like to extend my sincere appreciation to all the members of Scholar Circle, and we did not expect such a group to turn out to be. We were overwhelmed by the participants who have joined us. So I would like to place this on record. Our sincere thanks to the history fraternity and the senior academicians of history, the ones who are going to, whom I'm going to call right now. It's a very long list. So starting from Dr. Vasanti Vijay Kumar, Dr. Nandan Sastri, Dr. Maya, Dr. Razia, Dr. M. Jansi, Dr. Swati Muthu, Dr. Eugene, Dr. O.C. Pramod, Dr. M.N. Rajesh, Dr. Ramya, Dr. Chalapandian, Dr. Archana Soman, and the spouse of our speaker, Dr. Archana Jeevanandam, Dr. S. Xavier, Dr. P. Kumar, Dr. Kavita, Dr. Usha Devi, and I'm sorry if I missed anyone. The list is too long, and we are very happy to have such eminent persons among our lecture now. And thank you so much for joining this lecture series today. Your presence, encouragement, and the scholarly support inspire us very greatly. So we are truly grateful for your guidance, blessings, and we hope to continue receiving your encouragement in our future lectures and our academic endeavors. And I would be very disheartened if I miss my friends, my colleagues, my co-scholars, Mr. Maria Michael, Dr. Joseph Rohit, Mr. Balasubramaniam, Mrs. Lipika, Mr. Muttamil Mudalvan, Ms. Lisa Rose, Mr. Avinash, Ms. Niveda, Ms. Sriranjini, Mr. Yogesh, Ms. Aisha, Mr. Surya, Mr. Sanjay, and Mr. Vignesh. So, with all these persons' teamwork and effort, this lecture has commenced. This lecture series has commenced with all your presence, and I thank each and every one of you for making this event to happen. And I thank Lord Almighty for bringing us all together in this session. Once again, thank you all.